you know, it just shows you the extent of the trouble that the country is in right now. And, you know, and I think the easiest thing to do, you know, I understand what you're saying about spending, but the first 2 years that President Obama was in and he had a supermajority, the discretionary spending in the country increased by 25%. So I think, like, if I was a business or everybody here has had to tighten their belts, you know, maybe going back 2 years to what your budget was, I don't think that that's as draconian as people make it sound like. And the things that they're fighting over isn't really cutting the budget. What they're really fighting over is cutting the rate of increase in the budget over the next 10 years. And, you know, and I think you really have to go out to people and be honest with them and say the country's about to go bankrupt. You know, and here's, you know, here's what's going on. And, you know, I made the mistake. I made the mistake of saying that I thought that Paul Ryan, exactly what I said, and the guy filming it has it on film, but they cut it all up. But I said, you know, I think that the Ryan budget was a good starting point for discussion. You have to start somewhere and put something on the table. Simpson-Bowes is, you know, the president had this commission, special commission, and they put together a budget blueprint to get us out of this mess. And they came out with it, and then the president ran away, you know, and everybody else ran away because, you know, it was, you can't do this without, you're not going to be able to make an omelet without breaking a few eggs as far as what has to be done to help save the country. And the problem, again, in Washington, when you have everybody vilifying and demonizing people, people become very timid, and they, you know, say what you want about Paul Ryan, but the guy had enough guts to put a budget plan out. We haven't even had a budget for 3 years. The Senate hasn't even done a budget for 3 years. It's totally irresponsible. You know, so you got to put something on the table that you can start working on. And, you know, people might get mad at me down in Washington for this or that, but the thing I will do is I'll always tell people where I'm coming from and why, you know, why I'm voting the way I do. And I think that's the problem in the country right now. We need leaders and problem solvers.
Yes, when the flat tax get rid of loopholes and tax breaks, would that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Simpson-Bowes came out and said. They basically gave 3 different scenarios. And they said you can reduce, you know, you could end up with just 2 tax rates. It could be flat, it could be fairer. If you got rid of most of the stuff that's in there right now. And, you know, some of the deductions are really popular, like, you know, mortgage interest deduction and charitable giving or state and local taxes. So then they said, you know what, it might be really controversial. Here are 3 different scenarios you can follow. And I think that's fair. You know, I depend upon mortgage interest deduction for my business. I love mortgage interest deduction. But take a look at that for a minute. When that was originally passed, it wasn't meant for second homes. And that's what it's used for now. And it wasn't meant to be $1.1 million cutoff. You know, that was, and it wasn't meant for people to have yachts. I mean, that counts as a mortgage interest deduction, from what I understand. So, you know, maybe looking at that and saying, you know, let's get that back to what it was supposed to be to help middle-class families buy homes. And, you know, I have to say, too, and it should be said, that if the government has to give people their money back, their tax money back, so that they can afford a home in the first place, they're taking too much in the beginning. You know, so we probably shouldn't even have a mortgage. We should have lower rates. You don't even have, you know, situation. So that's sort of the way I look at
it. It talked about a 20% reduction into the tax rates. But I also listened a little bit further and heard Governor Romney talk about basically remaining revenue neutral. And I hear all this talk about putting more money into people's pockets. But the revenue neutral doesn't sort of hold true there. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not running for president, and I haven't studied Romney's tax proposal. But, you know, I don't think what we really need right now is tax cuts per se. You know, I think we need, again, to clean up the tax code. And I'm not running on his plan. It may have merit, it might not. I'm just, you know, I want to be the congressman from this district. And I think part of the problem in Washington, too, is that there should be a disconnect in a way between the president and the Congress. And the Congress should start acting independent again and looking at everything independently as an independent branch of government. And when Bush was president, they sort of all morphed together. the same thing has happened now. And, you know, so I don't look at everything individually that goes up. You know, I mean, I appreciate the fact that he's not talking about raising taxes. And that's.
But it's when he said the same amount of revenue will come in. I'm saying, well, okay, you could reduce the rates, okay, it's going to remain revenue neutral.
Yeah.
To remain revenue neutral, the money's coming from one place. And
Well,
it's going to be a shell game where we're taking money out of the right pocket and put it in the left and vice versa.
Not addressing the 16 trillion.
See, I think a lot of it, though, is that there's, and I know it's, what he's talking about is different, but Simpson-Bowes sort of sets out a blueprint for being able to do that. They show you how they can do that. I mean, it doesn't solve the whole problem, but as far as tax reform goes, it would be, you know, most of the people who take advantage of all the stuff that's been written in are wealthy people as opposed to poorer people. So I think like the federal government, I saw somewhere, takes in whatever it is in revenue, it almost pays out, in other words, through all these exemptions and credits, it almost pays out the same amount. You know, and that's the problem, is that you're losing so much. And it isn't the average person for the most part, I think, that benefits from tax breaks and stuff higher. And I think what Romney was trying to say is that, you know, that would be the, you know, it would be revenue neutral, and that would be where they would look if they reduce all that.
There was something that was mentioned in the Ryan-Biden debate that I'd like to know where you stand, and that was, I know there's a lot of discussion and rhetoric that's around whether or not the entire Bush tax cut should be continued. And there was a proposal that said, you know, let's keep the tax rates what they are for those making less than $200,000. Obama wants to increase them for those that are earning more than $200,000. And that the proposal was, well, let's separate the votes, as opposed to holding, you know, the rates hostage to raising taxes for the very rich. How would you vote on that proposal to separate them?
Yeah, I wouldn't vote to separate them. I think they're not tax cuts, it's current tax policy. So the real question is, who are you going to raise taxes on? And I think I agree with President Clinton, and he came out and said was that you shouldn't be raising taxes on anybody when the economy is in such bad shape. And what the proper thing to do would be to say, you know, extend everything for a year, do this comprehensive tax reform. Because the problem isn't the rates, it's this other stuff that we're talking about. And, you know, I think Romney during the debate explained it pretty well, that, you know, there are a lot of, they'll say, well, it's only for the rich, but, you know, a lot of companies are subchapter S companies like mine. And, you know, and 50% of all the workers in the country are employed by people who would be impacted through their companies, you know, by raising taxes. And I think that's the last thing that we should do right now. You know, I mean, so you know, I think if we weren't in an election season right now, you know, people trying to divide people based on, you know, all types of demographics, you know, pit the rich against the poor and this group against that group, this wouldn't even really be a legitimate, you know, discussion. I mean, it's just mostly I mean, you know, Congressman Taney was running around saying I was in favor of tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and I still don't know what he's talking about because I haven't endorsed any plan that, you know, yeah, it's like, but that's what it is. It's all just a bunch of, you know, and you know, so. I mean, I don't want to say Clinton was correct. I mean, I think he was correct. And here when Obama voted to extend those rates 2 years ago, he got up and said, I'm not going to increase taxes while we're in a recession. You know, that was his, you know, you don't do that. And I don't know what's changed between then and now. You know, now it's okay to, yeah, I mean, you know, getting the economy going, and people don't understand, like, I'll tell you what really prompted me, like, put me over the edge to jump in the race. When you do this, you're, you know, you're really diving in, and you know, your whole life changes. But in my real estate company, it's been really difficult. And last August, finally the phones were starting to ring. We went through a 2 or 3 week period where things were starting to perk up. And then this huge debate took place in Washington about the debt ceiling. And there were people in Washington that wanted just to default on our debt obligations and shut the government down. But John Taney voted to shut the government down, to fall. And in my business, the phones just stopped ringing. Because, you know, the national debate is about how broke we are, how the country's gonna lose its bond rating, this and that, and people just stopped, you know, and I heard it from a lot of other business owners too. You know, so it's almost like the people in Washington, they don't even understand